So we're going to get started. Thanks, folks, for being here at AWS. Welcome. Have a seat. Have a glass of wine, something like that. We're going to talk about moving workloads to AWS. And so specifically, we're talking about how do we establish a hybrid cloud, because that's where it's at, is taking public cloud and private cloud and connecting them together to share applications and to share policies and all those sorts of things. So we're going to talk about how to create that hybrid cloud specifically with AWS. And if my PC will let me advance the screen, we will. Clicker's not working. It is. It's getting tired. It's a tired clicker. That's the thing. Down arrow? I don't know. Maybe my PC is frozen. Ah. We'll take it. All right. So, the bottom line here, I don't think we all have to understand why we're doing cloud, but the bottom line is digitization of workloads is driving the adoption of cloud, right? And so that's where it's at. Most organizations are doing this, but the key is not only is it your applications, but it's your data that you need to bring to cloud operations. And, IDC says 60% of the GDP of the world is going to move through digital systems, which is pretty darn impressive. And that's what's driving this need for cloud, is agility. So what is the promise? The promise is, of course, flexibility at scale and how we're driving agility for organizations around innovation, and also the need to consume infrastructure fundamentally differently. That's really what's driving. And what that translates into is organizations are adopting public cloud, but they've got all this infrastructure on premises and they have private cloud on premises, and so they want to connect private cloud with public cloud in a way that allows them to take advantage of this thing called the cloud operating model, because the cloud is an operating model. So, as a result, if you've got some private cloud infrastructure, you've got some public cloud infrastructure, you want to be able to have them work together. And that's what this idea of consistency is all about. This challenge that, hey, the applications that run in your cloud don't necessarily run on-prem. That's a challenge. The management plane that you have managing your on-prem resources is different than the management plane that you have in the cloud. That's a fundamental challenge. So we're going to address that with this idea of consistency, okay? So what is this thing called Dell Technologies Cloud? It's really a combination of Dell Technologies on-prem infrastructure with VMware Cloud Foundation and connecting to Amazon Web Services with this same infrastructure. So we're going to talk exactly how that happens. But the key here is that you have to coordinate between your private cloud on-prem infrastructure and what's happening in Amazon. And VMware Cloud Foundation is going to be the key that's going to pull all of this together. So we're going to talk specifically about how that happens. So if you're going to connect on-prem with public cloud, what's the on-prem infrastructure? From Dell EMC, we offer this thing called Dell Technologies Cloud Platform, which is really a hyper-converged infrastructure solution for on-prem private cloud. And what we do there is very tightly integrate what's happening inside VMware Cloud Foundation with what's happening in the hardware. And the key to that is making on-prem operations as cloud-like as possible. You have a question? No, this is VCF on VxRail and some specific integration. We're doing that along with integrating that with Amazon. And we're going to talk specifically about what that is, and I'm going to even do a demonstration of how we do that, okay? But the key is, if you've got this on-prem infrastructure and you want it to be cloud-like, you don't have to worry about what version of my firmware works with what version of vSphere works with what version of vRealize, right? So the way we take care of that is by creating packages that allow an operator to actually, right from vCenter, to manage the infrastructure without ever having to exit vCenter, including doing things like non-disruptive, cluster-aware update of the entire software stack to include firmware, okay? So that's very powerful. But if organizations are interested in traditional storage or preserving investments they have in existing server infrastructure, we also have this idea of validated designs. So whereas I talked about Dell Technologies Cloud Platform, which is a complete turnkey solution, this is less turnkey, more take your favorite parts, combine them into the on-prem version of the cloud, okay? So one important thing is most organizations are looking at next generation applications a la containers and cloud native. And how do I integrate that with what I'm doing today in terms of virtualization? And this is where PKS on VCF comes into play, okay? So what PKS does is provide a complete standard upstream version of Kubernetes that runs on top of VMware Cloud Foundation, that actually allows you to do automated lifecycle management of that Kubernetes infrastructure. So if a new version of Kubernetes comes out, a new drop of upstream Kubernetes, and you want to update your clusters with that, we present a package, and your vCenter administrator can actually do a non-disruptive install of that new version of Kubernetes, just like you can do a new install of vSphere or vSAN or the other infrastructure that's associated with the core private cloud platform. So how do we connect to AWS and Amazon Web Services in this? So if this is your on-prem infrastructure, this might be Dell Technologies Cloud Platform with VxRail running on-prem. This is VMware Cloud on AWS, which is, it's essentially a VMware cluster running inside the Amazon data center. And what's cool about this is it takes the full VMware vSphere software-defined data center and runs it inside AWS. And what that does is that gives you the ability to actually move your applications without modifying those applications from your premises into Amazon and back again with the simplicity of vMotion or HCX. So we're going to talk specifically, and I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of workload migration between VMC on AWS and on-prem private cloud infrastructure. I'll show you what that looks like. But one of the important things is you can connect to those backing services that are so powerful within VMC and AWS. Because a lot of organizations say, hey, look, I'm not just going to AWS to move my application someplace else, right? Because that's just moving your application. They might be interested in taking advantage of RDS, for example, or one of the other powerful backing services, 100 plus, of course, that are available. So the key is that your applications that are running here can take advantage of those backing services as well as part of this solution, okay? So a lot of reasons you might want to do this. Sometimes we have organizations that come in and say, look, I've just been told I got to get some of my workloads into the cloud, but I want to do that in the most painless way possible. Well, why not vMotion them to AWS? That's about as easy as it gets, right? Or you might want to do refresh some of your existing infrastructure. How about taking those workloads, migrating them into AWS with a vMotion, upgrading your on-prem infrastructure, and then bringing them back, okay, without ever having to disrupt those workloads. Some organizations are looking for adding a little bit of extra capacity. Well, the SLA for standing up a cluster here is 2 hours. The SLA for adding a node is 20 minutes, okay? So you can very rapidly expand the amount of resources you have available to you in AWS and be able to vMotion right to that. And then another, of course, another common use case is disaster recovery. So let's do a quick demonstration. We're going to talk specifically about HCX. HCX is the technology that allows you to non-disruptively move workloads between your private cloud and VMC on AWS. What's cool is it extends your layer 2 network, so you don't have to re-IP your workloads. You can actually just drag and drop your workloads without having to change the IP addresses. And it also is compatible from the standpoint, if you've got an older version of vSphere, and you're concerned that it's not compatible with what's running on VMC and AWS, it will automatically upgrade your VMs as it moves them. And it does this all in a non-disruptive fashion. So I'm going to show you what that interface looks like. We're going to take a real quick look at that interface and what it looks like. So let me do a quick demo for you here. So this is a CAN demo. This is going to show you what the interface looks like. So this is the vCenter interface that you're familiar. Whoa, no, it isn't. Wow, hold on for 1 second. Just right. Right when the demo comes. Just keep in? Okay. Is it delay? There we go. Okay. So this is your, oh, you touched it. Okay. So this is your familiar vCenter interface, right? So, you know, the key here is that right within your vCenter interface, you've got menu picks that allow you to do this. And I'm just going to point something out. Notice this VxRail menu pick. This is where you get access to managing your on-prem infrastructure, should you be interested in managing your on-prem infrastructure without ever having to leave vCenter. So you can do, as I said, non-disruptive upgrades, even of the firmware of your on-prem infrastructure. But what we're going to talk about is HCX and that bulk workload migration and what that looks like. So you pick on this, it goes and it gives you a quick view of what your site pairings look like. This is showing that there's a site pairing between your on-prem data center and your Amazon instance, and it's showing that the site pairing is live and it's up. So there's a secure tunnel that's been established between your private cloud and Amazon Web Services. It also shows that there's some VMs that have already been migrated, and we're going to look in a little more detail at those VMs that have been migrated. So when you click on that, it brings up a status of some of the VMs that have already been migrated, but we want to migrate some new virtual machines. So in order to migrate those new virtual machines, you click here. It brings up the HCX workload mobility. Notice that what this shows you is some resource pools that you have on-prem. We've selected the PKS resource pool, and it's showing here the virtual machines that are available to be migrated over to VMC on AWS. You can select individual VMs. We're going to pick them all. And then I'm going to point out that these default options are what we're going to get to apply to all those virtual machines. So notice, for example, that we've chosen here to retain the MAC address. So the MAC address doesn't change of the VM as it goes to VMC and AWS. You can choose to upgrade vSphere to the latest version of the VM on in-flight as you're moving the workload. You specify your destination directory. You can also force unmount ISO images because you don't necessarily need your ISO. You don't need a CD-ROM driver up in VMC and AWS. So those default options get applied to all of those virtual machines. And when you go ahead and go to the next screen, it shows you, and you can scroll through to verify that those have been applied to all those VMs. And then when you go and choose to do the migration, it migrates the virtual machines one by one. We're pinging one of the virtual machines here. It stages those VMs, and when the VM is ready to be kicked over, it changes the traffic to point to the VM that's in VMC and AWS, and that's when you see a timeout on the ping. But that's the entire amount of disruption that you see in the workload as it gets moved. So it's as easy as that to move live workloads from your on-prem into VMC on AWS. And you can move them both ways. So we're just going to show you very quickly what it looks like to move those VMs back. There's also a reverse workload migration option. So we're going to go look at the pool of resources that's available to move. Notice I can choose here on reverse migration, okay? That reverse migration is going to show the resource pools that are in VMC on AWS now. These are the same virtual machine names that were on-prem that you moved over. We're going to select all of those to move back. It selects all those virtual machines. It applies all of those defaults that we showed before. and it then moves those VMs back. Now, of course, this has been sped up because it takes a while to move 16 gigabytes of memory, but this shows you the simplicity of the interface and how to move those. And as you go back to look at your on-prem cluster, you can go see what the status of those VMs is. So now this is back on-prem. You can see those virtual machines have all been moved over, okay? So it's that simple to move workloads to VMC on AWS from your on-prem infrastructure. So that's HCX, and that's the component of the solution that allows you to do that migration, right? The other thing is, and this is pretty important from the on-prem infrastructure perspective, we talk to lots of organizations that say, hey, really, I'm doing this because I want metered use and elastic capacity, right? That's why I'm going to cloud. We can actually provide metered use and elastic capacity for your on-prem private cloud infrastructure through consumption models that we have available. So to the extent that you're interested in, for example, you might need a 12-node cluster, but we'll put an 8-node cluster on site and only charge you for that. And when you use the 9th or 10th node, we charge you for that on a monthly basis, okay? For on-demand pricing for your on-prem infrastructure. That's all part of the cloud economics that we call Dell OnDemand, okay? We've talked a lot about technology. As we know, cloud is as much about people and process as it is about technology. After all, cloud is an operating model. It's not just a place. We've got a lot of experience helping organizations create a cloud operating model, and would like to help you as well. So please come see us. We've got a booth over in the Venetian. Drop by and see all the stuff that we've got over there. Thank you for your time today, folks. Enjoy AWS reInvent, okay?